Bullshit!
Hello, and welcome to another edition to Odd Times with Jacob, where I will be talking about things that I want to talk about. Those things may be things that I like, so those things may be things that I don't like. Who fucking knows? I don't know, fucking this shit, fucking... Now, if you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, there's something different here, as opposed to other videos that you have done in the past. What's going on? Why does this look different? Well, my friend, you are correct. You have a keen eye. I did buy a new camera, so yeah, now you get to experience my face in glorious 4K, which is pretty cool. And yeah, so... let's do it. So I know I'm like 2 months late to the party on this one, but I figured I'd make a video on this since I was planning on doing it a while ago and I never got around to it, so here it is now. But I will be talking about the film Spiral, otherwise known as Spiral from the Book of Saw. And yeah, this is the 9th entry in the Saw franchise, including the, what the fuck was that movie called? Jigsaw, that came out in 2017. So, Spiral is somewhat of a reboot of the first 7-8 Saw movies, and this time it is produced by, written by, and even stars America's sweetheart Chris Rock as the main character known as Detective Zeke. I've been familiar with the Saw movies ever since I was a little kid. I watched the first 6 Saw movies pretty much back to back, and then I remember watching Saw the Final Chapter, which is technically the 7th Saw film, back in theaters when it was released in 2011. And as a little kid, I loved this franchise. There was a point in my life where I was really obsessed with them, actually. Even though these movies play a huge role in the torture porn genre, which, would eventually inspire many horror movies to come after the first Saw movie, I remember liking the first 3 Saw movies a lot. I think they're all really solid, and I think it works pretty well as a trilogy, because for those of you who are familiar with Saw know that the main antagonist, John Kramer, dies in Saw 3, and it is kind of like the perfect ending to the trilogy in my eyes. So the first Saw movie is actually directed by James Wan, which coincidentally enough, I talked about him in the last video I did, which was the Conjuring films, which he also directed. But yeah, the first 3 Saw movies I have a soft spot for. I actually really enjoy those ones. As far as Saw 4 through 7 go, they're kind of all over the place for me. I watched all of them as a kid, and I really don't remember much of what happens in any of those movies, aside from, like, again, some pretty memorable traps. I do remember watching Saw the Final Chapter in theaters, and even as a kid, I always thought to myself, like, yeah, that one was nowhere near as good as any of the other ones. And then Jigsaw came out in 2017, which was directed by the Sprague brothers? Is that how you pronounce their last name? I have no idea. That one was alright. I didn't really care for it that much. I think I rented it at the Redbox when it came out straight to DVD, and I watched the DVD of it, and I just remember being kind of underwhelmed, and I think at that point I was pretty done with Saw. I think it's finally time for this franchise to, take a break, possibly forever, and not make another movie. But no, of course, this is a big budget horror franchise, so of course they're gonna make more. What else is Hollywood good at doing other than just making more movies of the same franchise? And so that's what they did with this new film Spiral that came out earlier this year, except this time Chris Rock actually approached Lionsgate in talks of making a reboot to the Saw franchise, and he told them this idea that he had, and apparently Lionsgate was on board with the idea, and so they made this movie. Chris Rock's name is kind of all over this thing, which is kind of interesting, and Samuel Jackson's in it too for a little bit, but yeah, so Spiral from the Book of Saw.
This shit hella boo.
As somebody who used to obsessively watch the Saw movies growing up, I'm willing to acknowledge at an older age that these movies are really not that great. However, there's no denying that these films are generally pretty memorable, with some fun and interesting ideas here and there, and there's definitely a reason why the franchise has the reputation that it has. But this, holy shit, this is just bad. Almost everything about this movie was a fucking train wreck. The editing in this movie is fucking abysmal, and it's easily like the film's weakest aspect. Genuinely some of the worst editing I've seen in a big budget movie in a long fucking time. None of the shots in here were even like remotely interesting, aside from one tracking shot that I can remember, which was pretty cool. It was in a subway, and it was just kind of following Chris Rock and some other dude as they were talking, and I was like, okay, the camera's doing some interesting stuff here. But other than that, the shots were pretty boring and uninspired. The cinematography really had nothing new to add to the table. I forgot to mention that this film is actually directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, who is the director of Saw 2, 3, and 4, so he's actually directed 3 Saw films in the past, and for whatever reason, he decided to come back and direct Spiral. But yeah, the direction in this movie was also pretty fucking awful. Although Darren Lynn Bousman was never really a great director of some of the earlier Saw films to begin with, the story and writing is not only horrible, but the acting in here is... The acting in here is laughably bad. Like, Chris Rock's delivery with some of his lines had me laughing out loud in the theater, so I guess the movie had that going for it, you know? That part I at least enjoyed.
I need everyone on this case!
Although it wasn't intentional, I'm sure I wasn't supposed to be laughing out loud at a serious line that Chris Rock was delivering in this movie, but you know, whatever, fuck it. On top of that, some of the dialogue... No, most of the dialogue is fucking atrocious. It's like something that you would see on like a daytime soap opera. Literally none of the characters were in any way memorable or likable, therefore I did not give a single fuck what was going on throughout this whole movie. The twist is so fucking predictable that it's like one of those things when you're watching a movie that introduces an idea or character and you think to yourself, yeah, I mean, I guess that character could be the killer, but there's no way that the movie's actually dumb enough to do it, because that would just be too predictable. But then it turns out that the movie's actually dumb enough to do it and is actually that fucking predictable. The antagonist in this movie is in no way likable or memorable, unlike John Kramer from the first 3 Saw movies. Like, he's just some dude who lacks complete emotional depth and any motivation for his actions, yet he can somehow pull off these super elaborate traps despite being a fucking doof. Not to mention, his acting was also laughably bad, which made the climax of this movie a lot more fun for all the wrong reasons. Like, there's literally no sign of intelligence or emotional depth in this entire movie, which made it hard to connect with the film in any way or even give a single fuck about anything that's going on. There were also moments in this movie where they attempted to be funny, but none of the humor landed like at all, and all the parts where I was laughing at, I was definitely not supposed to be laughing at. The copycat killer's overall appearance and the victim's tapes lack any sense of personality or aesthetic. Unlike the previous Saw films where the tapes and the killer were at the very least memorable, the copycat killer's distorted voice and the tapes of the movie also fucking sucked ass, which makes sense when you actually find out who the killer is, because he's just some fucking dork who lacks immensely compared to John Kramer. The music in this movie is absolutely fucking wild and all over the place, with just really over-dramatic music and overused sound effects throughout the entire runtime. The editing is so bad that it really just throws off the structure of the movie, and it just makes it feel like one big mess that's all over the place. Like one of those messes where you walk in and you're like, fuck man, this is gonna take me all day to clean, and you spend all day cleaning it, but the mess is still there at the end of the day, and then you end up cleaning it for a couple more days than anticipated, and it ends up being like this week-long project. This also has to be one of the most unsatisfying endings I've seen to a movie in a long time, which is upsetting considering how iconic the ending to the first Saw movie is, and it makes me even more upset knowing that this movie is a part of that same franchise. As I mentioned, Samuel Jackson's in this movie, and he just kind of plays Samuel Jackson, which is cool, but he didn't particularly save the movie. Chris Rock tries to be funny and just completely fails at it miserably. There's also a scene in this movie where Chris Rock and the police are slowly approaching this suspicious truck, and then all of a sudden the passenger door swings open and this pig falls out and it attempts to jump scare the audience. But it just turns out to be one of the weakest and most pathetic attempts at a jump scare I've ever seen, with loud crashing noises, and there's like even somebody yelling in the background even though there's nobody even yelling in the fucking scene. Like, they just added somebody screaming in post thinking it would spook the audience that this pig is falling out of the fucking truck. Like, give me a fucking break, man. Fuck the editing in this movie. The trap scenes are easily the most interesting parts in this movie, yet there isn't nearly enough of them. And not only that, but they're nowhere near as gruesome as previous Saw installments, so it even fails at just being a really shitty torture porn movie in general, let alone a Saw movie. There were maybe 2 or 3 traps that were pretty cool with a pretty interesting concept behind them, but that's that's really about it. The movie doesn't know whether or not it wants to be like a shitty CSI episode or just a boring torture porn movie, so it's constantly bouncing between both genres, resulting in just a complete total mess. Marisol Nichols is also in this movie, and her acting also fucking sucked ass. Sorry, but it's the truth. Chris Rock's character's name is Ezekiel, and everybody in the movie calls him Zeke, which is totally something that Chris Rock would do if he were to ever play the main character in his own Saw movie. There's literally no reason for this movie to exist, since it doesn't even do anything interesting or bring anything new to the franchise. In fact, it kind of harms the franchise by being easily the worst movie associated with the franchise. Fuck whoever did the editing in this movie. I don't know if I mentioned that yet. There's this weird tape that the police watch in the movie where there's like a puppet pig man, and at one point the puppet pig man like points a gun at the camera and just starts shooting at it, and there's even like and it's honestly kind of funny, but not intentionally funny, of course. But yeah, overall, this movie honestly makes the rest of the Saw movies look like fucking Andrei Tarkovsky's filmography. But yeah, overall, I unfortunately did not have a good time. In fact, this movie surprised me by how bad it was. It's baffling how bad this was, especially considering that the man who directed this movie has directed previous Saw movies in the past that I actually kind of have a soft spot for. Yeah, I don't know what the fuck happened, but it's... You know, I laughed a lot during the movie. I laughed, but, you know, for all the wrong reasons. Like I said, I don't know what else to say. I really don't. Overall, Spiral from the Book of Saw, it's a fucking 3. It's a 3 out of 10. This movie's a fucking 3. This is the quintessential 3 out of 10 movie of all 3 out of 10 movies. Like, this is a 3 out of 10 movie. That's kind of all I have to say about Spiral from the Book of Saw. It was not good. I did not enjoy it at all. I probably will never watch it again unless I'm like really drunk or high or something and decide like, oh hey, this would be a fun watch if I want to watch something horrible. But you know, why do that when you have shit like The Room or Munchie and Munchies? Like, there's just no point. There's no point. Might as well watch that, you know? Fuck it. It was boof. It was fucking boof. That's all. See ya.